My name is Zoe, and I'm here to tell you a story. It may be a little hard for some people to believe, but I implore any readers to beware. Don't ignore the signs, please. This isn't meant to be just a scary story. It's a message. If you're interested in learning more about them, good luck. Most of the internet sources got censored, and all the reporters refused to interview anyone involved. Now, moving on to the story. I'm a huge fan of music, and during my sophomore year of high school, I was heavy into my friend's band. They were called The Conjurers, and they mostly played black metal. They played in my friend Ethan's house, their drummer. I went to watch them practice sometimes, and over a few months they got more popular. They were even able to play the opening for a bigger band. And even though they seemed like a pretty cool group of friends, you could tell something was off with Ethan, or at least I could. Ethan was a pretty chill guy, and a really talented drummer. But at the time, he seemed to be anxious. He started watching his back a lot more often, like he was worried something bad would happen in the near future. I never thought about it much, but I probably should have. He also began to keep me from watching their practices. I remember bumping into their lead singer, Genova, once on my way to school. He graduated a few years before me, and he had some sort of box jutting from his book bag. I got a shiver down my spine, but I just assumed it was the wind, since it was October and all. I tried talking to him about letting me see one of their latest gigs, but he brushed me off like I didn't exist. I grabbed him by the shoulder and turned him around, so he'd at least see that I was trying to talk to him. He looked mad, like an evil scientist looking for revenge on the world that shunned him. His eyes were sunken in and his body was pale. He couldn't have slept more than a few hours in the last week. But the most troubling thing was that box. It was a thin, long cardboard box, but one edge of it seemed to be discolored and soggy, like it had a liquid had spilled on the inside of it. To this day, I can't imagine what exactly was in the box, but there was no doubt what that sogginess was from. The blood of a mammal of some sort. When the day finally arrived, I got ready to see my friend's concert. Ethan, still at his house, looked extremely worried, but I'd assumed that he just had the pre-stage jitters. I wasn't sure why at the time, but he kept telling me, "Please, don't go to this concert." I seriously thought he was going to cry. It was an awful thing to see. I'd never seen him so upset. So, to set his heart at ease, I told him I wasn't going to go, but I secretly just planned to stay further in the back of the arena. I offered to walk him to the bus, but he obviously didn't want me anywhere near anything involving the concert. I couldn't help it. The entire band had been hiding something big from everyone since they formed. But I tried to restrain myself for Ethan. But curiosity got the better of me. I snuck into Ethan's garage, and I suddenly wished I hadn't. I instantly became sick. It wasn't the goat head that caused it, and it wasn't the jars of eyes or fingers. Even the man's head, severed at the neck, what looked like a crude saw, which was still bloody sitting next to the jar. It was the half-dead middle school girl sprawled on the floor, naked, covered in blood, and in the middle of a pentagram, with strange writing scribbled around it. Seems pretty cliche. A band of teenagers playing music in their garage, worshipping Satan and all. I wish I could tell you it was all a joke, but it wasn't, and it gets a lot worse. I rushed to help this girl and called an ambulance. I had to leave, rushing to the concert to make sure Ethan was okay. When I got there, the crowd had just died down, allowing the conjurers to speak before their first song. They said something along the lines of, "Open your hearts to Satan," which caused a mixture of applause and shock. I wasn't sure what happened after that, but the guys backstage pulled out a giant tarp with the same pentagram and writing on it. They hung it behind the band as they played, and the crowd cheered. Suddenly the tarp began to faintly glow. It began to glow more and more until it shone with the color of blood. It seemed to correspond with the song, and the tempo began to slow. I had a sort of weightless feeling, like I was floating. I was, and so was the rest of the crowd. People started freaking out. Others took advantage of the situation and fooled around, flying gleefully in the concert hall. I tried to float away, but movement was strange and awkward. I heard the band chanting in another language, something I hadn't heard before. There was a scream in the audience, and no matter what they were doing, everyone turned around to see what it was. There was a strange, giant red hand thrusting out of the pentagram tarp, and it was clutching the woman, who was snapped in half at the waist by this hulking arm. This demonic figure threw the woman back into the crowd, where she lay dead. People tried to leave, but it was impossible to move now for some reason. Ethan looked into the crowd with horror as we tried to escape while the figure strained itself to fit through its tiny portal. I shouted at the top of my lungs to try to get Ethan's attention, since he could still move. But he couldn't hear me over the crowd's cries for help as the demon pulled its other hand through the tarp. I used other people to propel me closer to the stage, finally getting Ethan's attention. "What are you doing here? I told you not to come, just for this reason. I didn't want you to get hurt by my stupid mistakes." I slapped him. "Why didn't you ask me for help? All of this could have been avoided if you had," I shouted. "Just grab the other side of this tarp and pull." The demon shrieked, a blood-curdling shriek, like it was being ripped apart. And it was, the muscles in its arms being shredded like the tarp. Then, almost all at once, there was a large thud. Then a nearly simultaneous thud a second later. The demon's arms fell to the ground, and then the audience. People had to be taken to the hospital. The band was arrested, ending the concert. Ethan and Genova both took their lives in prison, the rest of the band being killed mysteriously after they were released from jail. The event was rarely talked about, some too shocked to want to recall it. Others ridiculed for making such tall tales. After several years, it just became a common ghost story. But it did happen, and it's possible for it to happen again. So please, don't let it slide by unnoticed. Please. We got off easy, but next time, you might not be so lucky.
These scary skeletons speak with such a screech. You'll shake and shudder in surprise when you hear these zombies shriek.
We're so sorry, skeletons, you're so misunderstood. You only want to socialize.